Hello everyone, this is Suresh from Azure ADB. Today our topic is how to find date difference in months using date difference function and months between function. So first we'll see what about date different function. So difference between two dates. So either days, months, year. Okay, so date difference is used to calculate the date difference between two dates in terms of days and to compute the duration between two timestamps or date values. So that means date difference, it will give you difference between two dates in the form of number of days. And these columns, columns and data types can be either date type or timestamp type. And what is the syntax? So date diff, and we need to pass two parameters. One is start date and end date. So first we need to give end date, then start date. So this function takes the end date as the first argument and the start date as the second argument and returns the number of days in between these two dates. So for this demo, I'm creating one sample data frame. So in this, I have these many columns. And so respective column, I have these values. If I try to create sample data frame, so finally I have total 4 columns of date columns. One is a start underscore date, end underscore date, and one more is purchase underscore date and delivery underscore date. If you check data types of each column, mainly on these date columns. See from here to here, by default, it reading as string data type. So we are manually creating these values, these data frames. So it reading as string data type. So first what I'm doing is I'm converting these two columns, start underscore date and end underscore date. I'm converting to date data type. So for that, I'm using with column and I'm taking this first column as start underscore date and I'm using to underscore date function on top of this start underscore date. So similar way, I'm applying to underscore date function on this particular column end underscore date. See if I try to run this, if you observe data types, see for start date and end date, see data types got changed from string to date data type. So next what you will do is, you will try to calculate number of days getting between two different dates. So for that what I'm doing, I'm using with column function and I'm trying to create new column that is difference underscore days and I'm using this date diff function and I'm giving my first parameter as end column, that means end date, end underscore date, that is this one, and the second parameter as start underscore date. So if you see difference between these two dates, this is end, this is 2023 and this is 20. And if you calculate number of days between these two dates, it giving here. Okay, so between this and this, we are getting 812 days. So there are 812 days between these two days. So similar way, end date is 2029, start is 2013. So 2013 to 2029. By considering these months and dates, we are getting this many dates difference. See for each and every row, it giving their respective number of days. Okay, so this is how we can use a date diff function. So next, what I'm doing is I'm doing select function and I'm using current underscore date function to get today's date, and I given alias as current underscore date. And I'm taking this one more column that is called start underscore date. So this one. So here I'm pausing to columns. So first column, what I given is current underscore date. So that is it giving current date. That means today's date, it printing here. And a similar way, I am calling start underscore date column from existing data frame. And on top of that, I'm creating one more column, that is this one. I given alias date difference in days. So here I'm using datediff function and I'm passing first parameter as current underscore date, that is this one, and this second parameter as start underscore date, that is this one. So if you check number of days between this date and this date, if you see here 2025 and this is 2020, so almost 5 years. Okay, and if you calculate difference between these two dates, so you'll get this many number of days. And similar way for each and every row, it giving respective number of days difference. Okay, so next what I'm doing is, so I'm trying to find a date difference between these two columns, delivery date and purchase date. So if you see our original data frame, so these are original data frame, purchase date and delivery date. So I want to find a number of days between these two dates. But if you see here, these two we have string data type. So here I changed only these two columns. So these two columns still it is string data type. So here string data type. So for using date difference, what I'm doing here is I'm using date difference function, but these two columns should be of date data type. So to change from string to date data type, I'm using to underscore date function on this particular column, delivery underscore date, to underscore date on purchase underscore date column. So now what it happening, it will generate new column, day difference underscore days, that is this one. Now we are getting date difference between these two columns. First, it will generate between these two dates. So this is 21, this is 22. And this is 11 month, 5th month. And if you minus based on this month date, so we are getting number of days difference is 172. So similar way, respective rows, it giving date difference. Okay, so now we'll move on to second topic, months underscore between. So as of now, we calculated number of days between two dates. Now we are going to calculate number of months between two dates. So by using this function, I'm going to cover these are all the topics. So first one is date difference in months. Second one is date difference in seconds. So for getting seconds, I'm using two different functions, Unix underscore timestamp and to underscore timestamp. One more is a date difference between minutes, date difference in hours. Okay, months, seconds, minutes, hours. So first I'm calling required functions. So mainly I'm calling floor. So since we had to use these two, I'm calling this to underscore timestamp and Unix underscore timestamp. And we have to use this function month underscore between. So for converting, I'm calling to underscore date. And round and floor we'll discuss further. So when to use those two. So what is our first thing? Date difference in months. So for this, we are going to use months underscore between function. So what it does is it returns number of months between dates, between two dates. Suppose we have two columns, date 1 and date 2, then it will give you number of months between these two columns. If date 1 is later than date 2, then the result is positive. A whole number is returned if both inputs have the same day of month. Okay, so the difference is calculated assuming 31 days per month. So the result is rounded off to 8 digits unless round off is set to false. So this will discuss in examples what it means. So what is syntax is months underscore between. So inside that we need to pass two parameters. One is end date and start date. So it returns number of months between two dates. So here we need to pass these parameters. One is end underscore date. So this is compulsory. It represents the ending date. So similar way, start underscore date. This also compulsory and it represents starting date. So round off, that is Boolean. So this is optional. Okay, so it represents the difference to be rounded off or not. Okay, so if you pass true, it will round off. If you pass false, it don't round off. So this is optional. So whether to round the final value or not. So default is true, and by default it will give you 8 digits. So that means 8 decimal float value it will give. So this also we'll see in the example what it means. So first I'm creating one sample data frame. So here I have total 4 columns, and so all are I have first two columns I have date values, and remaining two I have timestamp values. And if you see here data types, see since we created manually, so all 4 columns has string data type. So first what I'm doing, I'm converting this one to respective uh, data types. Since first two are date type columns, so I'm trying to convert from string data type to date type. So for that I'm using with column function, and on top of that I'm using to underscore date on this particular column from underscore date. And a similar way for this column I'm using to underscore date function on top of this column. And the next two are timestamp. So for this, I'm using to underscore timestamp function on this column from underscore date time. And my timestamp format is this one: year, month, date, hour, minute, second. So similar way to underscore timestamp function on this particular column to underscore date time. And this is the respective timestamp format. And this is my sample data frame. And if you see here, so these data types got changed. So first two I converted to date type, and remaining two I converted to timestamp. So next what I'm going to do is how to find the month difference between days. So I'm using here a select function on top of this data frame. What I'm selecting is from underscore date and to underscore date. So these two columns I'm picking, and on top of that I'm using months underscore between function on. I'm passing two parameters here, that is to underscore date column and from underscore date column. So it has to give the number of months between these two dates. So 21, this is 19. And I given alias months between. And same function, see code is same between those two columns. Only difference is I given floor. So why I given floor, we'll discuss this. So this column name is months between. So if you see number of months between this date and this date, that is 27 months. Okay, but if you see this, it given decimal values, and if you count up to 8 decimals, it will give you 2, 4, 6, 8. See, by default, it giving 8 decimals. If you use this one, months underscore between, and any two date columns, it giving by default up to 8 decimals. So that is a point here it is mentioned. See, by default it giving 8 digits. That means you are not doing round off, this one, round off. So we are not mentioned here. Default it is true. Since it is true, it's generating 8 digits. And if you want to round it off, so here I used floor function on top of this code. So now what will happen? See, it it rounded off. See here after 27 we have 8 decimals. No, it rounded off to 27. So 20 point is a 20, 22 point is a 22. So it will round off by using floor. That is months between floor. Okay, so next what I'm doing, I'm using with column function. So here I used to select function. So here I'm using with column function. That is this one. So here I given heading. So with column and months between. So I want to create new column, months underscore between, and I'm using floor and months between these two dates, to underscore date time from underscore date time. See here, to underscore date time from underscore date time between these two timestamps. And if you observe here, we can use it, this months underscore between either date column or timestamp columns. So here, while doing select function, I selected date columns. So similar way, you can select timestamp columns also here. So similar way here, I used with column. Here I used timestamp columns. So similar way, you can take date columns also. So since I given floor, so whatever these months between this new column, see it all got rounded off. So if you remove this floor, then it will give you up to 8 decimals. So after applying this, after adding this months underscore between column, on top of that, I used select statement, and from original data frame, I am trying to pick only these 3 columns, to underscore date, date time, and from underscore date time. Already we have in our sample here in our sample data frame. And on top of that, months underscore between. So whatever we newly created, that column I'm calling here. So total 3 columns I'm generating here. So next what we'll do is same example. So I'm trying to do different ways. So same months underscore between to underscore date time and to underscore date. That means here I took 2 timestamp columns. Here I took 2 date columns. And in this example, I'm trying to select 1 date column and 1 timestamp column. So months between to underscore date time. That is this one, timestamp column, and to underscore date, that is date column. So I want to find number of months between these 2 columns, and I given name as months between. See here, this column, it giving you number of months between these. So it is giving minus because of we are giving to underscore date time first. So if you see here, 2020, 11, this is 21. So since this value is less, that's why you are getting minus. So that is about first column, months underscore between. So second one, months underscore between underscore false. So here in syntax, we already discussed by default, it is true. See default, this is round off is true. Suppose if I change to false, that means if I mention false here, round off value, then if you see here, see by default, it giving up to 8 decimals, okay, after point. If you give false, it will give around 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So up to 16 decimals it giving. So similar way floor. So floor we already discussed, it will give round off. So on top of that, I used a select statement. So to underscore data frame and to underscore date, it is from our original data frame. And these are the three columns we generated now by using this with column. So those three I selected here. So finally, we are getting these columns. So next, I created one more sample data frame. So here I have two columns, ID and date. And if you see here, these are the values. And since this is, it will give you string data type. So I'm converting here this date column. I'm using to underscore date function on this date column. So finally, if you see, you will get date. Okay, so this is my sample data frame. So on top of this, what I'm doing is I'm trying to generate four new columns. So this is my original data frame. On top of that, so I'm using months underscore between. Here I'm using current date. So current date means today's date and call date. So between today date and this date, what is the difference? That means number of months. So it giving. Since we used only function, it giving 8 decimals up to 8 decimals. And second column is true. So by default, it is true. Okay, months underscore between, by default, it is true. So generally, no need to mention this. So only this much is enough. But for to clarity, I mentioned here this true. So difference months true. If you see here, you will get same result here because these both are same. So whether you mention true or not, by default it is true. So if you mention false here and difference months underscore false, this one. See here, it will give you 16 digits. Okay, so next I'm giving round. So this whole thing, current date and this date. So between these two dates, how many months it generating? No, it going to round off up to 1 decimal. I given round and I given 1 decimal. If you see here, all values, it is rounded to 1 decimal. See here, earlier I used floor. Okay, so you can use it either floor or round. So round, we have flexibility to decide number of decimals. But in floor, it will round it off. And so same thing, we'll see how to do it by using Spark SQL. So what I'm doing is, so whatever I have, this data frame, no, df underscore sample1, df underscore sample1. If I go here, this one. So this data frame, we have total 4 columns. This one I'm creating one temporary view. So first I'm using on this data frame, I'm using create or replace temp view and view name I'm giving as days. So after creating this temp view by using spark.sql, I'm using select statement. So total we have 4 columns. So from that I'm selecting only 2 columns from underscore date to underscore date. And on top of this, I'm using months underscore between. Months underscore between these 2 columns, to underscore date and from underscore date. And I given alias as months underscore between. Since I used to floor, it giving you round it off. Okay, this from this view. So here what I used is spark.sql and inside that I given SQL query and finally I given display. So next I used a %SQL. Here what I'm doing, select months underscore between. I am giving hard-coded value. So one timestamp I given, one date I given, and this is the alias name, months underscore true. See here, after point, it giving you 8 decimals. So here I used floor, it got rounded off. Here I am not used floor, it giving up to 8 decimals. Next, same function, months underscore between. Here I am using false because here default it is true. So since I given false, and if you see here after decimal, it taking 16 decimals. So whether in PySpark or Spark SQL, this syntax is same. So result will be same, true or and false. So next is, as of now, we discussed about how to generate difference between number of months between two dates. Now we are trying to generate a difference between dates in years. So earlier we found months. Now we are trying to find out years. How many years between two dates? So this particular data frame I'm selecting. On top of that, I'm creating two new columns, difference underscore years, different underscore years underscore round off. So here what I'm using months underscore between function on current date, that is today date, and this date column. So today date minus this date. And what I'm doing by 12 I'm giving, because up to here months underscore between these two columns, it will give you number of months. Number of months it will give you result. If I do by 12, number of months by 12, then it will give you years. Okay, on top of that, I given round function up to 1 decimal. Okay, difference underscore years. Since I given 1 decimal, see here, between these two dates, it giving you number of years between two dates. And a similar way, here everything is same. Only difference is here I given hard coded 12. So similar same code, instead of 12, you can mention it lit 12 also. So remaining everything same. So you will get the same result. So this is about getting number of years between two dates. Next we'll go for date difference in hours or minutes. So what is the syntax is Unix underscore timestamp. So this function we need to use to get hours and minutes. So this we'll see how it works. So here what I did is Unix underscore timestamp. Okay, so this syntax you can use it in either way, either this way or this way. So here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to generate these total 5 columns, new columns on top of this data frame. So initially we have these 2 columns. So on top of that I'm using this UX current date, that is this one. So here what I'm doing, I'm generating current underscore date. That means today's date. That today's date, I'm using Unix underscore timestamp function. What it does is today's date, it will convert to milliseconds. See here, whatever this value is, so it is in milliseconds. If you try to convert these milliseconds, you will get you today's date. So similar way, I'm using Unix underscore timestamp on top of this date column. And if you convert this date, this will give you this milliseconds. Okay, so this in date format, same date, it is in milliseconds format. So similar way, I'm using Unix underscore timestamp. I'm trying to subtract current underscore date means today date, and whatever this call date is, so this date, today's date minus conversion of this date. So that means this date, it will convert to this value. That means this one, Unix underscore timestamp call date. So that means this date, it will convert to this milliseconds, and this milliseconds minusing with current date. That means today's date, first it will convert to milliseconds like this value. Then this value, this milliseconds value minus this milliseconds value. So that we are getting here seconds between this one. So that means if you see here Unix underscore timestamp on current date. So that means this one, that is this one. Okay, that is this same thing. And whatever this one, Unix underscore timestamp call date, that is this one, that value is this one. So here what I'm trying to do is, what is this one is, this minus this, that giving this one. So that means between two dates, it giving you difference between seconds. So number of seconds between two dates. So similar way, minutes, if I want to find out, see now I have seconds. Okay, so seconds between. So here we found what is the number of seconds between two date columns. So that is this one. So on top of this column, I'm using by 60. So if you do by 60 for seconds, we'll get in minutes. That is this one. So similar way, sorry, minutes underscore between, that is this column we already generated. If you do one more time by 60, that is the 60, call minutes underscore between by 60, we'll get hours. Okay, so initially we have our two input columns. One is current date column and this date column. So on top of that, first we are generating seconds between these two dates, and minutes between these two dates, and hours between these two dates. Okay, so next date difference in seconds. So here we are using two functions. So first I'm trying with Unix underscore timestamp. If you see here, what we used is Unix underscore timestamp. So same function I'm using here. So syntax is same, timestamp column and the timestamp format we need to send. So it will give you a number of seconds. So that means you can say this is Unix Apache format. So that means milliseconds. And on top of this sample data frame, I'm trying to create these three columns. So first one is Unix underscore timestamp current date. So these two we already discussed. Okay, so that is this one. So current date, it converting to milliseconds. This one, this date. So each date it converting to seconds. So on top of that, I'm doing minus. Okay, that means this value minus this value, it giving you seconds between. So this we already discussed here, same thing. So same thing it is repeating here. So this date difference in seconds by using Unix underscore timestamp. So next we can use it to underscore timestamp. So for syntax is timestamp, column we need to mention here, and format. So yeah. So on top of this sample data frame, I'm trying to generate 4 more columns. So date and current date. So earlier we used two Unix underscore timestamp function here, Unix underscore timestamp. See here, Unix underscore timestamp we used. So now I'm using two underscore timestamp on these base columns. Okay, so what it does is it will convert to timestamp. See here, this date column, it converting to timestamp. See, date is same, so remaining all 0, but it converting to timestamp format. So now we have total 3 columns, date underscore ds and current underscore date, that is this one, and later we are converting to timestamp. So that means this date column we converted to timestamp, this current underscore date, this in date format, that we converted to timestamp. So later what I'm doing is to underscore timestamp of current date, that is this one, current date ds, and Unix underscore timestamp of to underscore timestamp call date, that is this one. So we are finding difference between these two timestamps, and it will giving you in milliseconds. So why it is giving in milliseconds? So first to underscore timestamp of current date. So that is this one. So current date it converted to timestamp value. So this timestamp value it converting to milliseconds because we used Unix underscore timestamp. That means this value it converted to milliseconds, and similar way this one it converted to timestamp value, and this timestamp value converting to milliseconds. So to underscore timestamp of call date, that is this one, date converting to timestamp. That timestamp I'm converting to milliseconds by using Unix underscore timestamp. So this difference we are getting here. So finally, difference between these two timestamp columns we are getting here. So seconds, difference of seconds between these two columns. Next, suppose we have columns of different format. Suppose if you see difference between two dates. So suppose when dates are not in date type format. So normally date should be in this format, year, month, date. Suppose if a date is in other format. So what we need to do is first we need to use custom format. So first we need to convert it to proper format. Then we need to use this months underscore between function. And if you see here on top of this sample data frame, I'm using months underscore between. If you see here, to underscore date, from underscore date, see these are all string columns. And if you see here, see these are all string columns. So this string column, first I'm converting to date type. So on top of that, I'm using months underscore between. Since I'm using round and I want to round it off up to 2 decimals, if you see here, date difference, I'm getting up to 2 decimals. So this is months. Since I used months underscore between, this is number of months. So number of months, so this is 27.3, this many months between, difference between these two columns, to date and from date. Between these two dates, this many months is the difference. So next, same function, I want to find out years. So here we found out months. So here I want to find out years. So same syntax I'm using here, same code. So only thing is I'm dividing by 12. So here you can give simply 12 or you can use lit 12. And I'm rounding off up to 2 decimals. So whatever year we are getting now, months value, if you divide by 12, we'll get this one. See this value, if you try to divide by 12, 12 to 24, 3 point, okay. So 2.25. So here 20.25 is there. So we are 12 months. So this will get 1.7. So finally, we'll get number of years difference between these two dates. So here also, if you see to date from date, initially it was string format. I converted to to_date format. And one more thing, so sometimes these custom format mainly I explained by using data type mismatch. But you can do one more thing also, like custom format mainly. Suppose here date is in all in digital format. Sometimes you'll get 2020 FEB, then date. So those cases, you need to convert to custom format. So that time, same to_date function we had to use on this particular column. And here comma, you can mention comma, and you can mention it year 4 colon 3Ms colon DD. Okay, so that is actual custom format. So based on this input, we can change. So here I have data type mismatch is there. So I used to_date. So if we have different format, so different format than this. Okay, so then on top of to_date, you have to mention that custom format. Okay. So that's all about this video, how to find date difference in months and number of days between two dates. So that's all about this video. If you really like this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you.